Sony just delivered an absolutely massive FPS boost. PS5 sales have quadrupled, so here's what Sony can learn from it and what's next for Metal Gear Solid. Well, we're going to talk about all of that in today's video. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving weekend playing a ton of video games. I played some Battlefield 6 as usual, and also I ran through the original Half-Life for the first time. I played Black Mesa back when it came out on PC, but I wanted to play the original and it was excellent. Hopefully Sony adds the PS2 port to the PS Plus premium catalog because it's actually a really good port of Half-Life. It's not just like a one-to-one sort of copy and paste. They added in some new stuff to make it work well on a controller, and there's a co-op campaign that is canon that's only in the PlayStation version as far as I know. So like the PS1 and PS2 version. Let me know what you're playing down in the comments below. But let's get into the first news story here, because Sony has been working behind the scenes to increase FPS in a lot of their old games. And honestly, if you ask me, they've been doing a really good job. The first time we really saw them do this was with Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. They added in a balance mode, or like balanced RT mode, that if you had a 120 hertz TV, you could run the game at 40 FPS and keep all of the ray tracing features turned on. And 40 FPS, if you didn't know, is a really good sort of frame rate to lock your game to because it's halfway between 30 and 60. I know really halfway between 30 and 60 would be like 45, but for some reason, if you're talking about frame time, so the amount of time that's in between each frame that you see, 40 FPS is actually the halfway point and it looks and runs really well. So I've been glad to see them kind of adding in different modes like this to all their games, but then you throw the PS5 Pro into the mix where if you use these balanced ray tracing modes, you're actually leaving a lot of graphical headroom on the table. Like it has the ability in most cases to run with those ray tracing settings turned on at 60 FPS, and that's what they've been kind of going back in and adding for the PlayStation 5 Pro. The latest game to get it is Ghost of Yotei. So they just added this balanced ray tracing mode for everyone, whether you have a PS5 or PS5 Pro. If you have a PS5 and a monitor or TV that support 120 hertz, you should definitely go ahead and use it because it looks really good. And honestly, after a few seconds of adjustment, 40 FPS really is imperceivable to me compared to 60 FPS. Whereas, you know, even if you give yourself that adjustment period at 30 FPS, it's noticeably slower. Everything feels a little more sluggish. I don't know what the magic is with 40 FPS, but it works really well. But if you have a PS5 Pro, you're getting a little bit of an extra benefit here because they've added the ability to run the game with an unlocked frame rate. So if you use that mode that's mainly made for 40 FPS, it'll run at 60 FPS like 90 to 95% of the time. But then if you have something going on like a crazy effect, just something that makes the game harder to run, it's never going to drop below 40 FPS. And because the PS5 Pro is so powerful, it's very rare that it goes all the way down to 40 FPS. So if you have a TV that has 120 hertz in VRR, if you're using a PlayStation 5 Pro, even if it drops below 60 FPS when using this ray tracing mode, you're really not going to notice it because it's going to match the hertz of your TV to whatever frame rate the game is outputting. So it's like the perfect middle ground between the full-on quality mode and the straight-up performance mode that runs at 60 FPS. It is kind of a bummer that the game didn't launch with this. Sony is pretty good about this, right? Like they get the game to 100% done. Like it's complete. It has a quality mode. It has a performance mode. If you have a PS5 Pro, it comes with extra benefits and that's awesome. And then they save a few features on the side to add into the game with patches. And I think the reason they do that is to keep the game in the news cycle. If you save something like the New Game Plus mode or maybe some extra skins for after the game comes out, as long as they're free updates, no one's going to really care, specifically with the New Game Plus mode. I mean, it takes 30 to 50 hours to beat the game. So most people who don't mainline these games in a weekend, it's going to coincide, the update, I mean, with them actually finishing the game. And then it might inspire them, you know, to just restart the game and play through New Game Plus mode with all of their unlocks and everything in the game already. That New Game Plus mode will be a little bit shorter and it'll keep people engaged with their PS5 and the game that they paid $70 for longer. Something like this though, a graphics mode, I can't imagine this wasn't ready to go at launch, especially because it seems like even at its maxed out state on the PS5 Pro, this game still leaves a little bit of graphical headroom there that they could take advantage of. If it's a graphical feature or anything technical, I think they should just put it in at launch, but anything like New Game Plus, some skins, some DLC like the Legends mode, I'm fine to wait for that, because if the Legends mode is something that they're going to finish up after the game comes out, they can't have it at launch because then then the game would have to be delayed. And if the game's already done in the single player state, I don't mind them waiting for the Legends mode to come out later. So I'm glad they're adding it. I'm glad this new performance balance ray tracing mode is here. I hope we see it in more games, and hopefully third-party developers catch on to this too, because it just gives you that warm fuzzy feeling that you didn't waste your money on more power, right? Like, it gives you more choice in how you want to run the game. And if you have these perfect happy middle ground modes that are like 40 to 60 FPS, but 90% of the time they're at 60 FPS, and then VRR kicks in if it drops, that's the perfect mode for most people. Like, as someone who plays on the Steam Deck a lot, most games these days, I can't hit 60 FPS. And if we're being real, if it uses Unreal Engine 5, I can't hit 30 FPS. So I don't play those games on the Steam Deck. But if there's something new that comes out that does run well on the Steam Deck, but can't hit 60 FPS, I target 40 FPS because it just looks really damn good and I love it. So I know for console people, it's not necessarily the newest thing because, you know, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart came out within the first year of the PlayStation 5. But if you haven't kept up to date with it or have never really tried it out and you have the technology to take advantage of it, give it a shot, because you might find that you prefer 40 FPS to playing at 30 FPS, or you want those ray tracing graphics and you don't notice the infrequent drops from 60 down to 40. So good job, Sony, on this one. But that brings us to the second news story here, which is about quadrupled PS5 sales in Japan and what Sony can learn from that. So this is obviously about that digital model that they released exclusively in Japan. It's region locked, so you can't import it into the United States and save some money on the PlayStation 5. And the whole reason they made that console was because they've been getting their teeth kicked in by Nintendo with the Switch 2. There's no way around it. The Switch 2 is outselling the PS5 in their native country massively. Like, people are just choosing it over the PlayStation 5, and Sony wanted to do something about it. And one of the reasons they figured out that Nintendo was doing so well is because they had a region locked model of the Switch 2 in Japan. So like, you can only play it in Japan, you can only play it in Japanese, it's cheaper, and people are showing up to buy it. So they said, hey, why don't we reduce the storage of the PlayStation 5, rip out the disk drive and put a discount on it and region lock it as well. And it turns out that was a really good idea, because it took the sales of the PlayStation 5 in Japan from like 5,000 all the way up to 23,000 within the week that it came out. So what that shows is it's not necessarily the games that were holding the console back, it's straight up the price. Now, over here in the United States, it doesn't really seem to be that much of an issue that they continually raise the price. I thought it would be because we're 5 years into the console's life cycle, but you know, now that there are enough games taking advantage of the PS5 out there, they're kind of sunsetting the PS4, not releasing games on it in the first and third party. People are like, oh, maybe it is a good time to upgrade to the PlayStation 5. They see the price that Sony's charging for it and they just say that sucks, but you know, I really want the PlayStation 5 and I'm gonna pay it. They are doing a Black Friday deal that brings it all $50 lower than it was before they increased the price, which is good. So yeah, I think what they can learn from this is obviously that, you know, region exclusive models, if they can get the price down in somewhere like Europe or here in the United States or over in Australia, it's probably worth the effort to kind of segment off different units of the PlayStation 5 to then sell them cheaper. Because if they're selling well already here in the United States at the inflated price, you could imagine how much better they'd sell if they lowered the price to where they're at in Japan for these exclusive models, which is below $400. I think it equals out to like $360 or $370, which is a pretty healthy discount because that model launched at $400 here in the United States. And I am really worried about this RAM shortage. Like, I think it was great and smart that Sony stockpiled RAM, but as we saw earlier this year when Xbox raised the prices on the Series X and Sony countered them by lowering the price, that didn't last forever, right? Like, they did a cool sale over the summer on the PlayStation 5, but then just a few months later, they raised the MSRP because the parts or units that they stockpiled ran out of stock and then they were forced to raise the price. It's cool that they stockpiled RAM right now, but if the shortage continues and the prices continue to go up on RAM and, you know, like Samsung or whoever else don't open up more factories and start producing more RAM, they're just going to hit a wall. You can't start making your own RAM, you know, like you can't do things that don't exist to subsidize the price. They're going to have to raise the price of the console again. And I know it's a little bit better on the PlayStation side because in the United States, at least, they've only had really one true price increase since the thing came out, but I just don't like seeing the price continue to go up because it's not like there's a cheaper model coming. The next console Sony's going to release is the PlayStation 6, and I think that thing's going to launch at either the same price that the PS5 is currently at or a little bit more, like around $600. And if you're thinking that maybe when the PS6 is out, then they'll start lowering the price of the PS5 because they're going to keep it around longer. I don't think that's going to happen because as we've seen with Nintendo and the original Switch, both the original Switch and the Switch OLED got price increases when the Switch 2 came out because, of course, those components are getting more expensive. And this memory shortage is hitting GPUs as well right now. Like traditionally when Nvidia would sell a 4070 to a manufacturer like EVGA, they don't exist anymore, I don't think, but like they were the main Nvidia third-party seller of cards. They'd sell the GPU's chip with the memory already attached to it. So then EVGA would just basically have to put a case around it and then they could sell it in a different box. Now they're just buying the chip. They're not selling it with the memory. So if EVGA wanted to make a third-party 4070, they'd have to go to Samsung and source memory. And you know exactly what that does. It pushes the price of that third-party chip up. And then Nvidia says, well, the market's risen, so we're just going to start selling the Founders Edition or our Nvidia branded versions of these GPUs for a lot more to meet market demand. So everything's going to go up. That swings back around to Sony too, because if GPU vendors have to start buying memory, they're now in competition with Sony to get memory for the PlayStation 5 going forward. And that might extend to the PlayStation 6 because AI, I know people want it to be a bubble. It doesn't seem like it's a bubble. It seems like it's here to stay and prices are just going to keep going up forever. So yeah, I think what Sony needs to do is figure out a way to just lower the price of the console overall. So it's good to see that, you know, lowering the price in Japan increased sales. I think that's what they can really learn from. And the reason I want more consoles out there is because apparently there's more Metal Gear on the horizon. Apparently Konami's happy with the work that the studio did on Metal Gear Solid Delta, and that studio is already looking forward to the future. They didn't reveal what exactly they're working on, but when asked what game they'd like to remake next, I was kind of surprised to hear them say Metal Gear Solid 4. Specifically, they said the hardware of that era required extremely unique design choices to get good 3D performance with the tech available, and MGS4 ended up with some pretty unusual code because of that. Bringing it over now would be a real challenge, I think, and I'm pretty sure he's talking about the original version of the game. So if you have a situation like that where a game was built specifically for the PlayStation 3 and porting it forward would be pretty difficult, the next best thing to do would be to remake the game from scratch. From a level design perspective, I think that game could use some work. It is very corridory. Like you can just run through levels without engaging with any combat or really any stealth. Like you don't even need to use the octo camo all that much. You can just kind of run behind enemies' backs. When they do see you, you could just run away from them. And as long as you get to the exit point of that level, it's generally fine, right? Like if you make it to a boss fight, you're going to have to engage in combat. But outside of that, the stealth doesn't feel like stealth. It feels like you're playing stealth because you think enemies are going to see you, but 9 times out of 10, you could just run behind them and they'll never see you. I know it might be blasphemy to say this as a big Metal Gear Solid fan, like someone who's played every Metal Gear Solid on multiple systems. I played Twin Snakes. I played the original on PS1. I played the second one on PS2. I played the third one on PS2. I played the HD versions on my PlayStation Vita. Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, I'm like one of 10,000 people who bought that game for the PSP. So like I am a hardcore Metal Gear Solid fan, and I don't think Kojima needs to be there for new games. I think this studio did a good enough job with Metal Gear Solid 3's remake. They understand what makes Metal Gear Solid tick. I love that you could get the Peace Walker suit and it had bonuses in Metal Gear Solid Delta. I'd like to see them take a crack at a new Metal Gear Solid game, but if they are going to go forward with a remake, the only one I would want more than either the first game or Metal Gear Solid 4 would be Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, because it's just really damn good. Like I like Metal Gear Solid 5, but I love the story more in Peace Walker. I like the gameplay in 5, the story in Peace Walker. If you could translate the gameplay from 5 with Peace Walker's story, that would be my ultimate Metal Gear game. But yeah, I think they could do a decent job if they tried their hand at making a brand new game, but we'll just have to wait and see. 4 being remade is not a bad option. But yeah, guys, that's all I've got for you in this video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.